Good afternoon. It's Sunday, November 10th, 2024. You're watching Co-op for Two. Today we're doing another, probably long overdue, game design diary. This is number 6, talking about New York Noir, formerly known as High and Low, the Sherlock Holmes consulting detective-inspired game that I've been working on for 2 years now with the help of some of you in the channel. I've got some slides to go over. We're going to talk not about the entire system, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on progress in the last few months. But let me check in with the chat, see how everyone's doing. We've got our normals here. YouTube says 14 concurrent viewers, 4 likes. Anyone up to anything interesting? I guess before I get started with the board game design diary, I should do a little bit of bookkeeping and say that tonight there'll be another live stream, and that will be the first episode of a new series I'm starting called Tabletop Mystery Game News. And I'll be talking about all the news in mystery or mystery adjacent games like cold case games or puzzle games, escape room games, focusing on new crowdfunding releases and new retail releases and other news. So that'll be live, and I could use your help both in identifying newsworthy items and in offering some additional commentary while we go through them. So I've got my plate full today, but I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes, and we'll figure it out as we go along how to do it. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll get started. Marlene says, I was wondering how long tonight's show may be. You mean not this one, but the tabletop game news? Probably about an hour. Ideally, it won't be quite so long, but there is a lot to cover tonight. I didn't want to do it tonight, but there's enough Kickstarters ending that I thought I better jam it in today. Okay, so New York Noir. Let me bring up my slides here. Okay, so this is Game Design Diary number 6. Overview of today's session. I'm going to talk about progress on art, which is Logan. Logan's been working on the art. Then I'll talk about the casebook software that I've spent the last 2 months working on. And then an update about a long-awaited demo case. And then a discussion of volunteers that are wanted, needed for the project. And then some links. As a reminder, though, I'm not going to discuss the general concept of this game and this system today. For that, you should see the previous diaries where I go through in detail the documents that make up New York Noir and how they were designed and all the data that went into them and the maps and all that. I'm not going to be discussing any of that today. Let's start with an art update. So I don't know if Logan is in the channel, but Logan has taken on the drawing of art for the maps with gusto, and he is making his way through 35 neighborhoods, drawing buildings for each neighborhood, one neighborhood at a time. And he's actually had a much bigger challenge than he probably realized going into it, because he sort of volunteered to work on art. But he's doing both art and some historical research as he finds which places existed and does research on the buildings. He's taken it very seriously, the drawing of these buildings, and the result is pretty impressive. So here's his list, how he's tracking which neighborhoods he's working on. And I wanted to, let's see if I can bring up some of the images here. So here's the basic idea. Here's the Upper West Side neighborhood. And so you can see these are all historical buildings that existed at the time that he has drawn, sometimes from scratch, sometimes converted from photographs. But I mean, they're so beautiful. They're capturing, I mean, a huge part of New York City is the architecture. And you can see how much life this breathes into the maps. If you look at the maps as they are, they're pretty anodyne. They're very, very sterile looking. And so the idea of adding some real flavor to the neighborhoods. Now, there's still work that needs to be done. Some of the maps have to be tweaked to make the building numbers, block numbers still show up. Like you can see this building is hiding this block number, block 23. So some things still have to be moved around. This sizing can be resized. Some of these buildings might be made bigger, smaller. You can see there's a little street name needs to be moved over. That's not Logan's work that needs to be done. That's me needing to be done. But these are also all named real places. Logan's been balancing off architectural interest versus places of historic interest. So much of these places, I forget what this building, this beautiful building all across the side of this park, what this is. There are labels for these, but that's the other thing that has to get done. I have to go put these labels in for each of these buildings where appropriate. Logan has his own preferences for things. He says these things are sized appropriately, and I'm a little more willing to mess with sizes to make them fit. But you can see, that's the Natural History Museum, says Logan. Okay, well, I've been in the Natural History Museum, and it is beautiful. But you can see why some of these places would attract a player's attention. Okay, so here's Upper West Side. Here we have Times Square. And one of the assignments that Logan has taken on is to try to make the different neighborhoods have different personalities. That's one of the ideas of making New York noir and making Manhattan sort of manageable, is that each neighborhood should have its own personality. So he's trying to capture some of that by which buildings get drawn, and some of these are just beautiful. And these have been drawn at higher resolution. So if you're an author writing a case and a player goes to one of these buildings, you could have a nice, larger, full size image of that place in the book. Here's Times Square. Here's Tenderloin District. Look at that. There's the Empire State Building. Some of these buildings look a little large, like this one here, but Empire State Building should be large. And then we've got Turtle Bay. Wait a minute. That's the Empire State Building. What is this? The Chrysler Building? Chrysler Building, I think that is. Empire State Building and Chrysler Building look similar. Okay, and here we have Hell's Kitchen with some boats and stuff. Here's the Gas House District, a really rundown, scary district, and he's even drawn these famous big gas tanks. And some of what Logan is doing is discovering that there's some areas of the map that need correcting. Here we have East Village, Carnegie Mansion, a snooty upper class. Look at that castle over there. Here's the Civic Center, lots of governmental office buildings. All clumped down there near Chambers Street and Broadway. Here's the Bowery, once a famous area, now run down a bit. Anyway, so there you go. You can see he's hard at work. These aren't just random buildings, remember. These are serious, all historically, all real places and what they really look like. So, if we have more artists, here are the things that would still be nice to do. All of the parks should have custom art. That's the other thing that I think will liven up these maps. And the parks will be of a different style. And I think the style I like best for the parks is almost like a schematic. We have one sample in Hell's Kitchen somewhere, not on this map. But all of the green blocks are parks. Probably you could expect one per neighborhood on average. So maybe a total of 35 parks need to be hand-drawn with a little bit of color. I think that and the buildings are going to make the experience of working on the map significant. And then we'll play around. Once we get everything in here, we'll play around with sizes and labels and etc. Okay, so anyway, I'm so appreciative of Logan's work on the map art. I think it's going to make a huge, huge difference. Okay, now I'm going to spend some time talking about, well, before I get in here, let's check in with the chat. Let's see if there are any other questions about the art or anything like that. Melissa says, I will test play things, but no way I can come up with all this unless you need knitting or crochet items. Logan says, plus we have the character portraits. Yes, I haven't shown the character portraits, but I've discussed them in previous game design diaries. But again, the idea is to make a living, breathing world for others to write cases in. All right. did I talk about the goal here? We do have a timeline goal here to try to get all of the map art. Logan's going to try to get all of the map art done by middle of 2025. That does mean that we need to find someone to do the parks, because I'd like to have the parks done at the same time, maybe by August 2025. But anyway, Logan has been a godsend to the art project, and it's really been wonderful working with him, especially, as I said, since he's really taken on a bigger job than just doing the art. He's doing half research, historical research on it. Eric says, Eric, who did some beautiful recent cards for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, says, have you entertained the idea of using photorealistic 3D renders for crime scene photos? I have a bit of experience with 3D graphics. Well, I guess there's lots of different ways to think about some of this. There's the materials and art and software that goes into writing the system, the base set of materials that authors are using. And then there's authors' case-specific stuff. So I think that might fall into the category of a particular author might need certain resources for certain cases. And ideally, we'd like to have a sort of team of volunteers. All of this will be open source, so anyone can write a case. But part of the aim for this is to have it so that if someone comes and says, I want to write a case, and I'm not good at art, could someone do a cover drawing for me? Or can I use some illustrations of characters and allies or buildings? Or I'd like some facsimile documents, like some letters written, that we could put the authors in touch with the volunteers so that we can help case authors produce very high quality cases. That's the idea. So a big part of Logan's motivation is to create these resources so that authors can make nicer cases. And Eric's suggestion about crime scene drawings fits into that category. It would be nice if an author could say, hey, I've written this case and I'd like someone to do a crime scene drawing or write a coroner's report that looks realistic. Then we can hopefully connect the two. Okay, well, in that vein, let's talk about casebook software. So the first book case, the case that I wrote for New York Noir, High and Low, called The Wrong Book. Here's a small version of it. This is a playable case that you can download and play now. And a piece of software I wrote to create this book with a nice index, with these common boilerplate text, some systems for telling you which markers you have to find on each day, for organizing hints and documents and everything. So a piece of software was written to do that. And over the last 2 months, I've completely rewritten it to be a much more proper tool with a formal grammar. So it was, the first version was sort of written ad hoc in Python, produced a reasonable output, but was sort of would be hard to extend, hard to do future development on, and very messy code, and not a formal grammar. So things would, if you tried to use it at scale and teach people how to use it, there would be problems, etc. Anyway, so 2 months ago, I began a project that I thought might take me a couple of weeks, but really has taken over 2 months to completely rewrite the whole thing. And my objective was to make it much more on par with the interactive fiction tools that exist today, things like Twine, couple other tools that are proper little mini languages for designing games. And so I have designed a little language called Casebook that is specialized for creating these kinds of choose-your-own-adventure Sherlock Holmes consulting style books, but also which would be suitable for online play and play by mail. And I'll circle back to that in a minute. So now there is the Casebook language. There's a formal EBNF grammar for that if you're interested in that. There's a whole document describing the philosophy of the language and its aims and the reference functions for it and all that. And then there's also an online portal for using this tool and creating and managing accounts and publishing cases. And part of why that's important is because I'm very interested in using these tools to create play-by-mail games. That is, someone should be able to write a case for this world and then play it in correspondence style. Go on the website, submit their moves, get a letter in the mail a week later with updates. And there's lots of experimental ideas we want to play around with. A radio drama, automatically done stuff, etc. Tool is some combination of Python, Django for the web services, LaTeX, which is doing all the typesetting, and a Docker is what's being used to deploy it, which means there's an online web services that you can use, but you could also run that locally if you don't want to have any online connection or you're worried about it disappearing, etc. So we're going to visit this website now. I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour here. Let's see if I can bring this up. Okay. So here is the website at newyorknoir.org. Now, this is just, there's nothing fancy here. Still needs a lot of work, but let me just show you what it looks like. So I'm logged in as the admin here. You can create an account. You can't publish any games yet until I upgrade your account to being an author. But if you are interested in authoring a game, let me know. And the Docker image, if you want to run this locally, will be updated soon. So I'm going to click. Let me just bring up my keyboard here. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about this new Casebook language and tool, because I want you to get some feel of how it works, what the idea of it is. And it's a little bit, for people who are used to just writing, it's natural to say, well, why can't I just write my case the way all the other Sherlock Holmes consulting detective fan cases have been written? Just write it in a word processor. And of course, you could do that. But I'm going to try to explain some of the motivation for why months of work on these tools has been done. Okay, so I'm going to click on games here. All right, so you can see here are some cases that have been written. Here's the wrong book, the case that, first case that I wrote. And then down at the bottom is this new demo case that I've been working on. So I'm just going to click on this one. Part of the problem is that I don't want to show you too much of my big real case. So getting a demo case written has been long overdue. So what you can see here is for this case, here are the set of files that it's produced. And they're really just the same case. There's a zip file with all of them. They're the same case, but they're in all different formats for different page sizes. So we'll decide eventually what different formats. But just to give you some idea, one of the things that this tool is made to do is to typeset and lay out a case in different formats for different purposes. And you can see, for example, here is the printed version of the wrong book. Okay, now this is 106 pages, double-sided with 2 columns. right? This is standard Sherlock Holmes consulting detective style, maximum print efficiency. But if you wanted to play this on a PDF on a tablet online, you wouldn't want it in this format. If you were going to play it online, you'd like it in a format with one lead per page so that you don't get spoilers and stuff like that. So, for example, you can see the solo screen letter. This is the layout for if you were going to play it. Well, this is my demo game, so there's not much content here, but this is the layout if you were going to play it on a tablet, one page per lead. So for example, there's a lead there on its own page, a lead there on its own page, a lead there on its own page, etc. So this layout is maximized for playing it online. All of the leads and everything else is linked. So you could play this game almost like a choose your own adventure game. You can see some of the things that the tool does are just layout tools, like making this nice big quote, putting these headings. Here, I'll show you in the source code where it says you've gained a document. You can see here it says you've gained this document, tells you what page it's on. You could click on that and jump to this page. This is the demo case, so I'm not worried about spoilers. You can see it's laid out things with typewritten text. That's all. These are all things that the casebook PDF builder creates. And it creates all this sort of boilerplate text telling you when time advance. It uses these things called tombstones to tell you when a lead is, when you've reached the end of a lead. It's got code for generating all kinds of things, like every day it tells you what markers you have to find and generates these calendars and all sorts of stuff. And produces this nice index here. Now for this demo case, there's very little to it, but for my real case, you could see the index is actually several pages long. Okay, so that's just an example of the different formats it will generate, and it'll produce a large font version for hard of people with vision problems, etc. Okay. Now, if I move down here, this is what you would see as an end user, or maybe the author would just decide, I only care about one of these and I'll upload that to BGG, whatever. But now if we look at if we edit this game, I'm going to click edit here. So you can see this is what an author editing a game would see. Very few settings here that aren't in the source code. It's just got a preferred size to make it easier for you to build a single output that you prefer. So if you're in the US, you might choose letter size, otherwise A4 if you're in Europe, etc. And whether you prefer 2 columns or whatever. But this is just your preferred size. And then, whoops, a little hard to use this on tablet. Okay, then here is the actual source code for my demo case. Now, the top of this looks a little messy, but you can see most of it is just plain text. There's that quote we saw at the top of the page from Sherlock Holmes. This is the line that says, put in when the day was June 10th, 1915. Here is the text. Most of the text in Casebook is designed to let an author just write pure text, but then occasionally you can embed things like an author note here. And if we look comments, Most of what you're writing is just plain text with a little bit of markup, but occasionally you'll do something like, here's the part where it says you gained access to the document, the typewritten note that was on page 81 or 31, whatever. This is the line that brings that in. This says, give them this document, and this document is defined elsewhere. It's what inserts the code that gives a nice graphic and says, go, you now have access to this on this page. It's got some extra ability to keep track of the logic of the case. I'll show you why you might want to do that as an author. This is not actually part of the game, but I'll show you what that does actually. Here's the lead section. You can see I've got a lead number and a person and then the text. So most of the time you're just writing it as if you were writing plain text. Occasionally you'll have some text like this, where it's a little bit of branching. It says, if they've found this tag, then tell them to jump to a section that says this. If they found this tag, do something else. So this line here, hashtag inline. If we look at the produced PDF, it'll say, if you've circled F, go to lead 425, which is a randomized lead. So it's grabbed this text, this sentence here, and popped it into a new random lead that it knows it can use. So it's basically creating these branches, choose your own adventure, but the author doesn't have to worry about that. The author doesn't have to create a new branch somewhere else, sorted alphabetically. The author just writes this paragraph here. The tool branches that off into a different section. And then here are the documents. We have a suspect sheet that is rendered in typewriter font, and a note, another note rendered in typewriter font here. And then we've got our conclusion and questions, whatever. So I've just gotten started writing the demo case. And then we've got some instructions here. And then the rest of this information is all taken from the source, from the casebook source, which is what all this messy part at the top is. This messy, let's see, can I go up faster? This messy part at the top is the thing that's specifying the title, the difficulty, the length, how to organize the sections, the multiple days there are in this case, what date they're set at, the starting and ending times. Here are the tags, the two documents. So here's the tag that's used to represent it. And then here's a circle marker F, whatever. The tool figures out how to refer to certain things so as not to give them away. Okay, so that is what it looks like to edit a case. Now, if we go to uploaded files, this is where you could upload images that are part of your case. Here you saw that was the cover page that I used, but you would upload any images you use in your case, and then you could embed them in the case. And then if we look at generated files, this is where sort of the work gets done. So there's 4 little sections here when you upload a case. So I've uploaded this case called The Crooked Past. This first link here, let me edit it actually. I'm just going to add a blank line in here somewhere. Okay. All right, so I'm going to save the changes. Okay, now let's go down. So these are the published files. Now I'm going to go into generated files. Okay, you can see it says they're out of date. So basically, this website is keeping the currently published files unmodified. So when I change the game, the published files still don't get changed. That's because you could make changes, mess something up. You don't want to disturb the published files. So the published files are still in my old version. But now from here, I can generate a couple things. The preferred PDF, this is what you would normally use for testing. So it's been configured as a 8.5 by 11, 1 lead per page. You could see it takes about 20 seconds to build. So I'm going to click build here. It's queued it up. It'll finish in 20 seconds. But if you had multiple people working on it. Okay, so it's running this job. It's telling us how long it's been in the queue, what version it's been built with, etc. It's going to finish this in a minute or so. Okay, so it's completed, and then we could go check it out. There's the case that it's just built. Just to remind you, remember I had that tag that said it was, if they found something, there's document 1, that it knows at the end of the book. Here's the part where it says, you need to find before the end of the day marker F. Now we know that marker F, as the author, we've written it and said, we've said the thing that you have to find is this note, but the game has figured out, okay, I'm going to assign that the letter F. I'm not going to tell the person what F means, but the author knows it's marker F. Anyway, these are just all things that the tool does. Okay, so that was the preferred format to check it out. And then if you were confident about it, you could tell it to build this entire queue of all these different formats. That would actually take 4 minutes to build the complete set. There's also a debug build that can get built. I'm not going to rebuild it, but we're just going to look at it. Now, for the wrong book, my big real case, this debug build is actually very useful. For the demo case, there's not much here, but let me just give you some idea. So here's the plot map that it generates of the case. And you can see basically, here's that tag. If they found Jacob, you can see where they get it, where they check it, what day the deadline is. And here's just some various logic links where from the introduction, they get access to these documents, and this lead implies this lead. So if you look at the wrong book, this plot map is a giant structure. But this is all stuff that the tool can create automatically because it knows some of the logic of the game. Now let me show you a different example. Well, a different output of the debug build. So debug build generates lots of stuff. It generates the casebook source code in HTML that is suitable for putting into a Google Doc. It generates databases of all of the leads that are used so that we could lock it into the database, or so that you could plot it on a GIS map. But one of the most useful things it produces is a debug build of the case. Now, let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is the case, got rebuilt, got built as in debug format. This would be what you would do if you wanted to check your case for issues. So let me just show you how it differs a little bit. First of all, this whole section here is generated in addition to your case. This would not normally be in your case book, but a whole bunch of little reports are generated for you. All of the leads get amended so you can see what they're actually referring to. Normally you wouldn't be able to see that. But now let's look at this author report and see the kinds of things. Now again, for the demo case, there's very little to look at here, but let me just show you. These logs are PDF files that are pulled into the source code. But here's the debug report that's added to this build that you wouldn't normally give to people. First of all, I've got my internal notes. If I defined any logic concepts in my plot map, they would be listed here. Here are the tags that have been defined in the case. So you can see here is the mapping from how it's called it when the players play. Marker F is really this tag found Jacob, whether they found Jacob Thompson. There are the two documents. For each tag, it's listing what leads it's checked in, what leads it's gained in, and a little warning here that you haven't yet written a hint for this. So you know that in this lead, it says, have you circled marker F? And here you'd see, oh, there's no way for them to get marker F. So that's a problem. Here's the two documents and where they get them and where they're checked. In this case, they're not checked. Check boxes for demerits. In my normal case, you can get demerits, and there would be 30 leads here where you get demerits. This would be a nice listing of them. Here's just the summaries of the 3 days in the case and what tags have to be found on each day. Little top lists of the longest leads, largest leads in terms of text size, longest leads in terms of time. Again, you could click on any of these to visit them and check them out. It's looked through the leads for possible bugs in your quotations, if you've got a mismatched left and right quotations. Summary of any notes you've written in any leads for your internal stuff. Because all of the locations are in format of data format, it can see when there are issues, like you might have used a lead, but it doesn't match up with the database. In this case, it's just warning me that these places I've used are in the database, but haven't been marked as locked. So maybe in a future database, we would change them. Part of what this tool does is it outputs this data so that anytime someone writes a case, we could lock those locations so that even if we make a new update to the database, we make sure we don't change any locations anyone's used. And it'll do some other things here. If you're migrating from one directory set to another, it'll find places where it might have changed. List of all images you've used, images you've uploaded but not used, any PDFs that you've embedded in your case, in this case, that little chart of a log. Included source, in this case, there's some boilerplate text that I've used, any warnings. So there you have it. That's just an example of the debug reports that this tool will produce to help you try to find problems. Marlene says, odd question. Can there be a link that accesses actual news in York that relates to the case dates on what was happening at the time the case is written in? Not sure exactly what you're asking. You could certainly have URL links in a case, although most of the people who are attracted to this project don't want to have to play them, do online stuff. But of course, anyone could author a case with different, if you wanted to make a case that had online resources, you certainly could. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there, though. Okay, so is there anything more to show you about this? Okay, so after you build the draft publication set, if you are happy with it, then you could promote it to being published. So everything can be built without affecting the published versions. When you're happy and you've checked it out, then you publish it. I'm not sure if we'll really be using this interface as the official repository, or if an author might just build the cases with this tool and then host them someplace else. It's not clear. So that's the online casebook building tools. let me show you a little bit. So here is the demo case again that I showed you before, but here it is in Google Docs. One of the motivations for the design of this tool using plain text is to support collaborative editing. And so the fact that you are getting this nice laid out PDF with LaTeX, with page numbers and indices and just nice formatting out of plain text means that the plain text can be collaboratively edited with almost any tool, especially the tool we've been using is Google Docs. So you can use that to share editing, to mark it up, to leave comments. And you can see it's intended to be friendly to edit. So most of the thing that you'll be writing as an author is just plain looking text. And you don't have to worry about formatting page numbers. You don't have to worry about sorting your leads. You don't have to worry about organizing them by neighborhood. You don't have to worry about boilerplate text. You don't have to worry about assigning letters to conditions. You don't have to worry about branching possibilities and creating new leads. The tool is trying to do all of the error-prone, finicky stuff and let the author concentrate on just writing the story. And then here is a little bit of the documentation for the casebook language. This is in a Google Doc you can go check out. So there's a big chunk of stuff here talking about why the language is designed the way it is, trying to make the case for why such a tool is useful, talking about what I haven't talked about yet, which is the idea that most of the time this tool is being used to lay out PDF print books. But the other real purpose for all this is to use the same language to support play-by-mail cases where the computer is actually behind the scenes doing things like managing the tags and branching and sending of proper replies. Okay, so little discussion of the syntax of the language, the formatting, the function call syntax, and then a little discussion on collaborative editing using Google Docs, and then there's the formal grammar. And then at the end here, we have function reference. This is all automatically generated from the tool and will be changing quite a bit as it goes. If you're interested in running a case and doing more advanced stuff, some of this will be useful, although I suspect that the most useful thing for new authors will be just to look at the demo case. And that's my focus, is writing the demo case that new authors could look at and say, okay, I can model my case on this. Okay. I think that's almost enough about that. I don't know how convincing a job I've done of explaining why such a tool is useful to write cases, but I suspect it will become clearer over time, especially when we start supporting online playtesting and play-by-mail. Hopefully it'll be clearer, and we could also hopefully use this tool to do better translation of case text from one language to another. Should be easier with this plain text approach. All right, let me check in with the chat. What markup language do you use? Can you use Markdown to format it? Okay, well, so the overall language is a new language called Casebook, but the low-level formatting like italics and indenting and all that is Markdown. So if you're just writing text, Markdown. And then any additional fancy stuff like formatting a block in typewritten text or a nice big quote, all the extra stuff is all using this new language called Casebook and Casebook syntax. That document I showed you talks about the syntax of it and the philosophy of it. The underlying low-level formatting of lists and italics and bold is Markdown. All right. And then this is some of the stuff I've tried to convey about why this tool is useful. Multiple output formats, very fancy output formats with nice indices. Everything knows what page number to refer to. All of the items are linked, easier to collaboratively edit plain text, easier for the tools to spot problems and issues. And then a whole bunch of future stuff hopefully we can do because the data is all in a format that the computer can understand the logic of the game. It can do things like online playtesting and play by mail, etc. All right. Quick little story writing update. So finally I can get back to writing story and cases. It's been a long little side trip writing these tools. And now, though, finally I can get back to writing cases. And at the top of my list, so I've written my one big, hard, real case, which you can download and play. But now I'm circling back to the demo case. And the idea here is to do a short case that can be played by new players who want to learn how the basic system works, and a case that I don't mind giving spoilers to when teaching authors how to write their own case. So that's the purpose of this case. It's not a hard or particularly interesting mystery, but it does tie in to the story, the campaign case of our main detective in the High and Low campaign. So this is a case, basically, in the campaign, you start off as a financial crimes cop. That's what the wrong book case is in the middle of the campaign. Our detective is a PI, but he actually starts out as a financial crimes cop, loaned over to homicide, and I've already started to write that case. Some of you have heard the big long entries of that. The demo case is a little bit of a prelude to that. It's a sort of looking back at our detective when he was a child visiting his father. But so it's not a compelling mystery, but there is a little bit of motivational character building that leads into the campaign. But as I said, the main point of this is to have a nice short case that new players can see how it works, and authors can use it as a model. And we could even, I used to do this in the past. I did this for the first case. I read long sections of the first different case, but you can see here's the introduction. 9 a.m. Saturday, June 15th, 1935. I'm standing in my boxer shorts in the kitchen of my little studio apartment in Brooklyn Heights, staring at the coffee pot on the stove. Feels like it's 100 degrees in this place. I could still try to go back to bed, but it's hard to sleep in this heat. Or I could go grab that old dusty bottle of Macallan down from the top shelf. My brain's not working yet, and I can feel it drifting off. My dad would have been 78 today. I can feel my stomach tighten up when I think about it. I pull the step stool over and get the bottle down, along with the old glass that sits up there next to it. I blow out the dust and wipe it out with my shirt. He was a serious man, my dad. I can't remember him ever telling a joke. Hell, I can't even remember him ever laughing at a joke. I guess he had a tough life, or maybe that was just who he was. Maybe he laughed when he was at work. He was just a kid when my grandparents loaded him aboard a boat on the southern shore of England and decided to take their chances in the New World. I guess he didn't do too bad in the end. At one time, he was the top homicide detective in New York City. But then it came at a cost, didn't it? Us kids never saw too much of him. I pour myself a slug of whiskey and look up at the ceiling fan. I think back to how sharp he looked in his dress uniform and how proud he was back before things all went wrong. With the whiskey comes a memory I haven't thought of for a long time, a hot summer day, a lot like this one, but 15 years ago. I took the train into Manhattan with my father to his office in that Center Street police headquarters. It seemed to me I had gone with him a few times before that, but that's the only day I have a real memory of. It was my 10th birthday that day, and I remember thinking there was something different about the way my father had been talking to me lately. His words had a little more weight behind them. I remember he had me pull up a chair in front of his desk, and I remember thinking, this is serious. So that's their little intro to this demo case. And then we jump back in time to 1915. It's my 10th birthday. I'm sitting in a wooden chair on the second floor of the police headquarters on the Center Street, facing my father, who's peering over his desk at me like the world is resting on his shoulders. Other kids might be hoping for a party or a new toy on their birthday, but me, there's no place I'd rather be. Jack, he says, how do you feel about giving your old man a hand today and helping me with something? There's a pause then where I should be answering him, but there's no words coming out of my mouth, and I'm in some kind of slow motion trance. There's electricity in the air. There was an armed robbery yesterday at the bakery across the street. Armed robbery, Jack. He emphasizes the word and waits to make sure I heard him. That means a weapon was involved. From the center drawer, he pulls out a sheet of paper and slides it over to me. And then the player gets that sheet. Anyway, so this is the demo case, but it's told in the world of this larger campaign where we're going to live out the career of our main character. And this is a case when he's 10 years old. And basically, I'm not going to read all of it, but basically the father gives him a little assignment, a little fake case, so to speak. And he teaches him how to use everything. He says, if you're going to be useful, you're going to need to familiarize yourself with these directories. The first one's the white pages. So the father is teaching us as a kid how to use the materials in this game. And that's basically what this demo is going to be. Just setting this 10-year-old version of us out into the world as a little prologue to learn how things work. So here he is at the very end where he's taught him how to use the white pages, the yellow pages. He says, now we have the yellow pages. Lastly, we have this little beauty here. He pushes the largest of the books over to me. This is what we call the reverse directory, which is this one here. Now, these other two books are nothing special, but this one here, this is something only the police have. A big smile crosses his face, and my greedy hands slowly reach out and touch the edge of it. Look here, he says, as he opens it up and turns it to face me. See how it's organized by neighborhood and block number? Anyway, so he's teaching how the system works. He teaches the map and the directories. Okay. And then he starts to give him a little bit of advice about, he says, I spent a few minutes at the desk looking through the books and documents till my father finally gets up and says, "Okay, then, I'll leave you to it, Jack. If someone gives you a hard time, you show them this." And then he gives you a little note that he's written. He says, "And Jack, when you figure out where this guy's at, you keep your distance. Just pick up a payphone and tell him to connect you to me at the number on that sheet, and we'll go pick him up, or call me if you get stuck." "Maybe he's at home," I say sheepishly. My father chuckles and ruffles my hair, then sits back down and leans over the desk to look me in the eye. "It doesn't work like that, Jack. You're going to have to get out there and get your hands dirty, knock on a few doors, ask some questions. You understand? Check out the scene of the crime with your own eyes, talk to witnesses, figure out who you can trust and who's lying to you." "What do you think? You think you're up for it?" I look from my father back down to the books on his desk. "Think of it like chasing down loose ends, Jack. It doesn't really matter where you start as long as you don't forget to chase down all the loose ends." He reaches down and slides open the center drawer of his desk. Now, some guys trust their gut, but me, I trust in my notebook. And with that, he pulls out a brown leather padded notebook and puts it in front of me. "This is for you," he says, and he taps the notebook slowly with his index finger. "Keep good notes, Jack. That's how you solve a case. Good notes. You understand?" "Yes, sir," I say, still not looking up from the desk. "Good man," he says. Then I feel his hand reassuringly on my back, and he's gone, and I'm all alone with my books, trying to decide where to start. So, I'm trying to set the tone that leads into the campaign that you're going to follow. From now, you've met him as a 10-year-old kid all the way to the end of his career, at the end of the 10 full cases. But that won't be a real mystery to solve. You'll be solving a mystery in that case, but it'll just take 30 minutes and won't be difficult. But I've at least tried to make it so that you learn a little bit about your father, who plays a serious role in the larger case. All right, so I've given you a little bit of everything today. Let's go back to our slides. I think we're just about done here. Okay, I haven't talked too much by play-by-mail, but this is a major part of what I want to do with where I want to go with this system, is not just standard cases that you print out and play, but play-by-mail cases. And a major motivation for the design of this casebook language and these tools are so the software can know how to run a game. Either completely played online, like something like Twine, but more importantly, by players submitting moves and getting replies in the mail. And there's lots of new ideas we've had about how to run a play-by-mail game with some interesting new ideas. But I keep threatening to talk about them, but we've already gone for an hour, so I'm not going to. Okay, let me make the pitch now for volunteers. We could use more help. General encouragement is a big deal here. I mean, part of what keeps me going on this case is the encouragement of people who are interested in playing the game, who are not interested in helping design, develop, or even playtest, but just want to play the cases. And it means a lot to me. It does. I know Logan is motivated by the idea of people wanting to play it, and I certainly am. It's been 2 years now working on this game system, and I'm still loving it, and part of that is because of the encouragement. But if you want to financially encourage the work, there is a Patreon for Co-op for Two, and I'd love to have your support for the YouTube channel, but also for this project. Most importantly would be authors to write new cases. You can write a case, whatever you want. I'd love to play some occult, supernatural cases, but there's a document I've been keeping of ideas for detectives. I'd love to see detectives told from different standpoints. A woman detective, a black detective, that would be a totally different experience moving around New York City in the 20s as a black PI or a black police detective, but all sorts of other ideas. We had people, we were discussing that in the 20s, Sherlock Holmes would be an old man, but still alive. He could relocate to New York City. You could have some cases involving Sherlock Holmes. As I said, I'd love to play some supernatural occult cases, but you could imagine all sorts of cases. The maps and directory are being designed with the idea that it's set in the somewhere in the 20s to 50s, that range. But you could go outside of that range or earlier that range. It's just you'd have to have a little flexibility with the map being, you know, somewhat slightly out of date for some periods. But really, you could write a case here set in the 2000s and you'd have no problem whatsoever. The directory is big enough. The only thing you're not going to find in the yellow pages is computer shops. You know, that's the kind of thing. But other than that, there's no reason you couldn't make a case set at any time period. We still need some artists. I mean, we could take as many artists as people want to draw. Any art for anything, we'll take it. But top of my priority is the map art. Logan's got the buildings covered, but I do want to find someone to draw the parks. And then we've got a bunch of extra maps that I would love to have drawn. So if you look at the map atlas, every neighborhood has a map, but there's a bunch of extra maps that the game makes available in addition to the neighborhoods. There's one for each of the outer boroughs. The one for New York City has a total. So everything we've got is set in Manhattan, which is just one borough, but the more storied borough. But we've been talking about an expansion covering Brooklyn, but you've got the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island, or Richmond. So there's maps that these are taken from 1940s marketing book for the different boroughs. So you can, in New York Noir, you can visit each of these neighborhoods in each of these boroughs. So all of the main maps and directories are all in Manhattan, but the game does allow for you to visit a single entry in each neighborhood. But we'd like to have these redrawn to be a little cleaner and more appropriate for this game. And here's an overview of islands. So you've got Randall's Island and you've got Roosevelt Island, the Statue of Liberty, these sort of places that the player might go, Rikers Island for prison, that kind of stuff that we would like to have a nice custom map drawn with not nearly as much busy detail, just focusing on the outskirt islands and then maybe a simpler map of the subway, etc. So, and then it might be nice to have some other map of specific buildings that people could use in a case, like a map of the Natural History Museum, like floor plan maps. Might be nice to have a few of those. If you look at Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, there was a whole spin-off Carlton House where there's a mansion and got floor plans of the mansion. It would be nice to have maybe a dozen or so building floor plans that people could pull in and use in a specific case. And I'm reminded, since I've got this out, to show you, since I've been asking for an artist to do the parks, what I had in mind. So this was the demo park that was drawn up for us by the same person who did this beautiful cover, whose name now escapes me, shamefully. Someone can remind me. But he did a sample park that I really love this style because it's almost like a Adam Hall. Adam Hall, thank you for reminding me, Logan. Adam Hall was the person who did this amazing box art, who I've got to get do it differently for New York Noir. But anyway, he did this little schematic of this park that I love because, first of all, it's a different style than the building, so it's a little bit of variety, but also it's like a schematic. You could imagine a crime where someone was hiding behind a tree. And so I like the idea that all of our parks are sort of like potential crime scenes, or someone could actually tell you he got on the path going north and I lost him, and then the guy came out of behind the tree to the east and hit me. Like, I love this idea that the parks are schematic. So some of the parks you would just make up, but a lot of the parks are going to be real schematic based on the real layout of the park. There's some famous ones, Washington Square Park, that are very recognizable. So it's a serious job, but I think it will make a big difference. And then anyone who's interested in history, we could use sort of editing and looking for issues. Then there's a whole set of advanced mechanics that I'm finally going to get around to working on now. We've been talking about ways to use fingerprints, forensics, mugshots, criminal histories. Now that I finished this casebook tool, I can start working on some of that. And I think some of those ideas, we have some ideas for. I showed off some ideas in an early game design diary, but I think there's some ideas that are actually very friendly to a play-by-mail system that I think I might focus on. There are some things that can be done with pencil and paper with a little bit of work, but I do think there's a potential to do some really cool stuff with play-by-mail, because the idea that you would request reports or interviews or fingerprint lookups that take time to come in, and the idea of being smart about restricting your search so that you get a reply quicker. If you're a coder, especially if you're a Python coder, there's lots of coding still to be done, whether that's improving the existing online tool or writing new tools to do standalone data generation or play testing or the play-by-mail stuff. Lots of stuff. And then I can always use the LaTeX experts. LaTeX is a very esoteric, convoluted system that we're using to do all the typesetting, and it still takes me quite a while when I'm trying to do something fancy. There are a couple things we want to do with the directories that I will struggle my way through. But if we get anyone who's got some experience, I could use it. Logan says, do you want to mention the postcard idea? Well, let me mention this. There is a Discord. Here, let me do this. There's a Board Game Geek page for New York Noir. If you don't know it yet, you can go, you can bookmark it, and I hope you will click that little heart to become a fan of the game. That's how I'm going to keep track of people who might be interested in news. So if you add yourself to that little heart list, favorite list, which you can see is, I guess I can't zoom in, that's that little heart at the top there in that little bar. Anyway, on the BGG page, you can download the first real big case, The Wrong Book, play that, and soon Rocky's case, you could download that as well. But you could download my big difficult case and play it right now. You'll be able to download the demo case as soon as it's working. You can click that heart to add yourself to the list of people who have favorited the game, and then that's a way that I could reach out to people and say, okay, we finally ready for people to make cases, like we've locked in the directories, or here's a place where you can order the directories printed out, etc. There's also a Discord channel for Co-op for Two with a whole bunch of Discord server for Co-op for Two. That's this YouTube channel with a whole bunch of channels for talking about New York Noir and game design, and constantly talking about ideas. And I just had, Rogan was mentioning an idea that I had recently where the old postcards of New York City are beautiful and they're out of copy right now. So I was thinking it would kind of be fun if in each case, when you visited a place, you would be told, okay, go in the envelope. You've got a little postcard, like a little collectibles that you kind of see sometimes in video games, but these would be real collectible postcards. But there's lots of things that we're still trying to figure out how to do in New York Noir and experiment with, and allies are one of the big ones. So if you have any ideas, game design mechanic ideas for a detective game, we'd love to have you stop by the Discord and chat. I think that's it. Yep, that's it. All right. Let me check in with the chat. We've gone an hour. That's about right. Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about, ask questions about? Maybe while I'm waiting for stuff, I'll rifle through some of the directories if you haven't seen them yet. This is the reverse directory, given a neighborhood and map. You can look up who lives nearby. There's the maps. You saw these on one side. So each neighborhood has a 2-page spread. A little bit of history of the neighborhood, points of interest, and there's the map with the neighboring neighborhoods blurred out and dotted. Debbie Levy says, I can do some editing on the demo case if you give me access. Absolutely will. Debbie helped do major editing on the wrong book case, and I was hoping that she would agree to do it on the demo case. We use Google Docs for that. That's partly why it was all motivated. Part of the motivation for the casebook tool is to facilitate collaborative editing. There's the yellow pages organized by business type. One of the other things we could use a volunteer's work on is touching up any of these yellow page ads that are weird and maybe removing the telephone numbers from them since they don't match up with the telephone numbers here. Logan says, it might be painful for you to run, but any thought on running the demo in small groups through Discord or YouTube? Get a few extra play tests under your belt. Yeah, I mean, the demo case isn't going to be very interesting, but I have run sessions of the wrong book, this case, which takes about 4 hours to play. I have run it at a couple of conventions. I've run it at Gen Con. I've run it at a local Tabletop Central, and I'll be running it again actually in January at a little convention here called Winter War. But this takes 4 hours to play, and that's hard to run. But having the demo case that can be played in 30 minutes will be a big help. You can see how big this real case is. But yeah, I could run the demo case on YouTube for sure to show people how it goes. There's the white pages. So this is our research guide. This is where you would normally find allies. We haven't decided how to do the allies yet. I think I know how I'd like to do allies in the campaign. I'd like to have no set allies at the start, but have basically every case of the dozen or so introduce one new ally that would then be useful in all the other cases. So when you play the first case, you would have no allies. By the time you get up to case 12 in the campaign, at the end of your career, you might have found 12 other sort of friends, allies, that you could visit for advice on any given issue. So you'd work your way up from 1 to 12. But I don't know how that would work in cases that other people want to write. Any other thoughts, ideas, questions, anything else you want to talk about? If not, we'll wrap it up. There's no harm sitting here in silence for a little bit. It's like at a classroom. Teacher says, "Is there?" Or at a conference talk, you say, "Are there any questions?" There's always some silence, and if you wait around a little bit, then you might get a question or two. So tonight at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, there will be the first episode of a brand new series on this channel called Tabletop Mystery Game News. There's a whole bunch of games behind me that are brand new that we'll talk about. We'll talk about some games that are ending their run on Kickstarter that we might want to fund. Maybe we'll decide as a group which of those games to fund. Debbie says, I'd be interested in working out if I could convert my own case using the tool. That's a good reminder to me that the tool to produce these books has been written in a very general way, and it can already be used to make Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective cases. So if you wanted to write a case for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you can use the casebook tool and it'll group your leads into neighborhood, northwest, southwest, west central, etc. It'll sort them all properly, format them all properly. So it's ready to be used to create Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective cases or Bureau of Investigation cases or Mythos Tales cases. And if you want to write a case that's not set in New York City, but in your own world, you could still use the casebook tool for that. And I'm happy to talk about adding features to do that kind of thing. The tool that builds this book doesn't really care. You don't have to, it's got a couple of special functions that if you choose to use them are meant to, that use the high-low system. Like you can tell it, hey, by default, every lead takes 30 minutes unless I say differently. But if you're writing a case that doesn't have time passing, you just don't configure that option. And same thing with the Sherlock Holmes neighborhoods. And all the boilerplate, like all the stuff you saw in my cases where it has the case log in their chart for you to track your leads. If your case doesn't use that, don't include that file. Upload your own PDF if you've got your own form that people should use, or don't use any. So you can configure this to produce books of any style, of any content. You do have control over it. There's nothing specific that locks you into this world and this data. It's just extra functionality if you do use it. It's interesting that the chat keeps disconnecting. The YouTube chat, I don't know why that would be. All right, it doesn't look like there are any other questions here. Well, I'm on Discord, so if you think you're interested in writing a case, but you're not sure how to get started with this casebook language thing, you could just start writing the case. Just write the text of the case. Don't worry about formatting it, whatever. And I'm happy to help get you started and help you see how to lay out your case, or take a look at the demo case to get some feel for what's involved. All right. Well, since there's nothing more, we'll end it here. Thank you for joining me. What I will be doing soon, though, is probably won't do another game design diary for a while. I only do them once every couple months. But I probably will start recording some separate little tutorial videos on using the casebook tools and the casebook language for those interested in a deeper dive. But if you are interested in volunteering, participating in any way, coding, writing cases, whatever, stop by the Discord or the Board Game Geek. I hope you will add yourself as a fan of the game on Board Game Geek to follow along with the development. 2 years so far on this project. I think we've probably got another year until we can lock down everything. Then we'll try to find some place to get the directories printed. And I'm hoping this time next year we will have a play-by-mail system set up, and you can actually play cases by mail, as well as a whole set of more cases to print and play. I'll see you tonight, some of you, or on the next diary. If I could find how to sign off. All right. See ya.